Okay, back at it, back in my file that I've got a bridge deck defined and all my constraints filled out for that and my beam layout and my beams have been placed. So right now, everything has been defined off of my profile grade line. It's still applying everything perfectly fine. It's just not showing that symbology for that 3D line. So essentially, what I was trying to say is that everything from this point has been defined from profile grade down. The thickness of your deck is a negative number. The beam placement happens based on where bottom of deck is and your defined fillet depth when you place your beams. But when you get to placing piers, they are going to be placed based off of your bottom of beams, and then your footings are going to be placed based on your terrain model. To define a terrain model, you go to your active bridge, right click on your active bridge, and just go to set active terrain model. I will do that in my plan view. Right now I have my level turned off, my existing ground line, so I can turn that back on. It's just asking me to locate the terrain model, which you do by locating the boundary of your terrain. You select it and it is now defined. So I will turn my existing ground line off again on my plan view to make it less confusing. And we're ready to go for pier placement. Just briefly, I will say that on the BM levels that are defined in the workspace, maybe the Connect edition does a better job. I don't see one in here just for pier, but I do see them for cap, column, pile, footing, and perhaps Connect edition does a better job of when you actually go to place your pier. This feature definition must do a better job of when you define it as a pier down here, that it's going to place things on the correct, all your different elements on the correct level over here. So I'm just going to pick a template, and you will see that there are a whole lot of templates. When we started this out, we were essentially creating a template for each bridge, and sometimes 2 or 3, just to see how things were working. So anyway, there's a hammerhead, there's a Mick pier in here, there's a Mick hammerhead in here. But right now, I mean, this is a railroad crossing, so I'm just going to select a 60-foot generic multi-column pile cap footing. So that's the one I'm selecting. I can place more than one pier at a time. I select support line 2, support line 3, and then reset to end my selection data point in order to have it place the piers. This does take a fair amount of time because it is placing a fair amount of elements. So after the pier placement, we will go in and modify the template for our particular case at this bridge. Okay, so there's placed my pier beams, columns, footings, and pile. Now, I'm just going to briefly show you the 3D view. Okay, you can see here that the top of those footings are just kind of they're not floating, but they're not well defined. They're right at the surface of the ground, and honestly, it's just because the columns in this template are defined as 24 feet tall, and so that places them right at the ground line. If I go into if I select my pier and go to properties, I'll show you first of all, zoom in, you can see that there's quite a cantilever for this pier beam from that column out. The reason is because we defined it in the template as 60 feet wide. OBM allows you, though, to adjust the pier beam, pier cap, as they define it, by the deck width. So doing that on Pier 1 as compared to Pier 2, you can see that it's wider, but this column is well outside even the limits of the bridge deck. So the reason that is because we've got 2 lanes left, 1 lane right. Or profile grade is not center line of bridge, but that's where it's going to place center line of your pier is at your profile grade. To alleviate that, OBM has allowed you to do a horizontal offset. I'm just going to do a 7 foot to the left negative offset. It's not exact, but you can see it shifted it over and it's at least better. So that's adjusting the cap length by the deck width and then a horizontal offset. And now I just want to show you the reason we attach the terrain model is so that you can come in and do elevation constraints, go to your footings, and I want to define it as 3 foot -3 below my digital terrain model. Apply it to all, and it updates all my columns to -3. Hit OK. Okay, so you saw it just barely lengthen there. You can see that now the pile caps aren't sitting right at ground line. They still are over here in Pier 2 because I haven't made any modifications to Pier 2. I believe on this bridge that we did a 5 column bent. I'm not going to go through that right now. I just want to apply my changes to Pier 2 as well so that they are equal. So I shifted it to the left, offset left 7 feet. I'm going to adjust the width to my bridge deck. Come in and do my elevation constraints. And I'm just going to put -15 on this real quick and apply to all of them. And just watch this over here in the elevation view. Okay, so it really lengthened those out. If I come into my 3D view, you can see the length of these drastically different than the length of Pier 1 versus Pier 2. And that's just, it bases, I'm not sure where it bases what triangle closest to center line of pier that it selects in order to offset it 3 feet. But essentially, you get the idea. You can define it for individual piers, or you can apply it to the whole lot. It does a pretty good job defining where it wants the bottom of the footing based on the terrain model. So that's your piers.